Hello and welcome everyone to our online small group again. We're starting our second series. So we had episodes 1 through 6 where we covered the patriarchs.
Yep.
And today we're starting a new series. So I'm JoshBlight, our outreach pastor at Thomas Hill Road Baptist Church. And this is
SteveVaughan, the executive pastor of adult ministries and missions at Thomas Hill Road. We're glad to be here today and excited about starting Joshua.
Yeah, so we're going to be jumping in a new section that kind of starts God fulfilling his promise to bring the people in Israel, and then kind of go through the period before the kings. So that kind of tells you where we are. So Steve's going to be teaching on Joshua, as he just said. So why don't we jump in with him and let him lead us today.
All right, well, as always, we're glad you're here, and we just want to remind you also that if you have any comments or you want to say anything, ask us any questions, we welcome those. Our contact information will be at the end of the video on the screen. Please do that. We would love to interact with you during the week when you're not watching.
We really would. We're just assuming so far that we have just been so good at teaching that
nobody's asking
no questions.
Yes.
So, but we would love
either that or we're really intimidating. We hope that's not the case either. But anyhow, so we're starting Joshua today, and whenever I think of Joshua, I always think of three words. I think of faith, I think of obedience, and I think of leadership. And so those kind of define the whole entire story of Joshua. We don't get a whole lot more from him outside of those three things. So, but when you think about that, you think about he was a man of faith, he was a man of obedience, God used him to lead his people into the promised land. So how did Joshua get to be the man that he became? And so Josh, I'm going to ask you a couple questions to kind of get us ready for talking about that. So when you're called upon to take a step of obedience, what obstacles frequently interfere with your obedience? Or what are some obstacles that might frequently?
Yeah, so, things that interfere with obedience is maybe how hard the task is, how big the leap of faith is, if it's a leap of faith is required. Sometimes with God, he calls us to do things that have consequences. And I say it that way doesn't necessarily mean they're bad consequences, but we may perceive them to be bad consequences. I know Katie and our life have had multiple times where God called us to up and move. And that was to Tallahassee the first time, it was to Indiana, it was back to Tallahassee, and all those had consequences. Now, we took the leap of faith, God always worked them out, but it was still scary. Katie, for the first time when we were in Indiana, had a career instead of just a job that she loved and it was doing really well at. And so the consequences of, okay, God, well, I guess we need to be obedient, it's pretty big. So those are all things that, for us, been an example in there too of they can hinder obedience. Yeah,
and you can be really, really comfortable in the place that God's asking you to move out of, or you can find the place he's asking you to move to scary, or there's some fear there, or stuff like that. So usually the interference that we have to obedience comes down to the fact that are we going to trust God enough that he is going to take care of us no matter where we are or wherever he puts us. So, okay, second question kind of relates to that. So what truths about God must we remind ourselves when the obstacles to obedience seem bigger than the rewards of obedience?
Well, the hint that I'm taking is in asking the question that God is bigger than whatever those obstacles are. I think of things to remind myself. I feel like this is why you've probably heard me say this, and I want to reiterate again, is that God's never, let me down, so I don't need to start pretending like he's going to start tomorrow. That's a thing for me, because like when God says, hey, I gave you this promise, if you do this, then I will do this, to remember that always is true. If God is then calling us to do something, he's never going to not come through on his end. And I think that's, to me, one of the biggest things to help overcome those obstacles is just stop myself, push the pause button, and say, of course God is going to come through. I just have to do my part. Yep.
Very good, Josh. So we're going to see some of these things in the life of Joshua. And so we're going to see how God takes this young man, puts him alongside Moses to learn how to lead, how to be obedient, how to have faith, and then we're going to see how he enacts that. And so we're going to start off looking at a little bit of his backstory, and then we're going to move into the book of Joshua, and we're going to focus primarily on Joshua 1, Joshua 6, and Joshua 24. So we're going to look at the beginning of his leadership, we're going to look at the biggest part of his leadership, and then we're going to look at kind of the end as he passes it off. But we're going to start all the way back in Exodus 17, verses 8 through 16. This is where we first meet Joshua. At this point, we've heard nothing of Joshua whatsoever. So It says in verse 8 of chapter 17 of Exodus, it says, "Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, 'Choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand.' So Joshua did as Moses told him, and he fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up on the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hands, Israel prevailed, and whenever he lowered his hands, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary. So they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and one on the other. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua overwhelmed the Amalekites and put his people to the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Write this as a memorial in the book, and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven.' And Moses built an altar and called the name of the Lord is my banner, saying, 'A hand upon the throne of the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation.'" So there's three things we see in this little introduction to Joshua. First is they introduced Joshua without any introduction. It's basically, hey Joshua, go and get some men, fight the Amalekites. So obviously Joshua was already well known, already pretty established, even though we had not heard of him before. And when you think about the fact that Moses is writing about him later on, 37 years later, after the wilderness thing, everybody by that point knew who Joshua was, and it would have been silly to really introduce him to the people. They would have already known because he had position, leadership, and had shown his worth. The second thing is he is given great responsibility the first time we meet him. He doesn't say, hey, Joshua, go with this person, this person, this person, and put together an army. He says, Joshua, take men and lead that army against the Amalekites. And so this is the first real obstacle, first challenge the Israelites had in the wilderness from a different people, and Joshua was in charge of that, and Joshua was the leader of the armies. The other thing is, in verse 10 we see Joshua didn't go, well, you know, I appreciate this, Moses, but I'm not ready for the task, or are you sure we can do this? He just said Joshua obeyed, did everything that Moses said, told him to do. And so Joshua goes out and leads the army, and then he's in this middle of fighting, and he's not aware of everything that's going on. But there's this backstory of Moses holding up his hands and closing it. So Joshua saw, even though he didn't know what was going on, he was a part of the ebbs and tides of this battle and experienced that. But then after he defeats the Amalekites, there's this little part in 14 where it says that God told Moses to write it down so the people would remember, but he said, tell it to the ears of Joshua. Not only did Moses want them to memorialize it, he wanted to make sure Joshua, who was going to a future, he hadn't been made the leader yet, but was going to be the future leader of God's people, remembered and knew this truth. And so you have this thing where we're starting to see that God is putting his hand on and selecting Joshua to be the successor to Moses. Okay, so we're going to fast forward a little bit into Exodus 24, verses 12 and 14. And it says, "And the Lord said to Moses, 'Come up to me on the mountain and wait there, that I may give you tablets of stone with the law and the commandment, which I have written for their instruction.' So Moses rose, and his assistant Joshua and Moses went up into the mountain of God, and he said to the elders, 'Wait here for us until we return.'" So Moses now has selected Joshua kind of as his second. God has put his hand on Joshua as a second. Moses is about to go do the most important thing that Moses does. Moses tells Pharaoh to let his people go in Egypt. Moses takes them through the Red Sea. Moses leads his people through the wilderness. He organizes his people. He does a census. He sets up the armies. He sets up everything else. But the most important thing that Moses did was he received the word of God, the law of God, the 10 Commandments and the rest of the law. And in that period of time, in that special moment that Moses is going up on the mountain to speak to God, takes Joshua with him. We don't always think Moses is up there all by himself, but Joshua is there, and Joshua is there attending Moses. And then we also see later on in Exodus 32 where he comes down the mountain with Moses, and so that kind of confirms that he stayed up there that whole entire time. So then in Exodus 33, 7 through 11, it says, "Now Moses used to take the tent, and he would pitch it outside the camp, far off from the camp, and he called it the tent of meeting. And everyone who sought the Lord would go to the tent of meeting, which was outside the camp. Whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people would rise up, and they would stand at his tent door and watch Moses until he had gone into the tent. When Moses entered the tent, the pillar of God would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent, and the Lord would speak with Moses." So when he went to this tent, the Lord's presence was there, and he spoke word to word, mouth to mouth to Moses. And when all the people saw the pillar of the cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise up and worship, each at his tent door. Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend. When Moses turned again into the camp, his assistant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent. So as we see in this passage, Joshua attended Moses while Moses was in his time of speaking to God. So he attended and he protected the meeting place in Moses' absence as well. So that you see Moses modeling the fact that if you're going to lead the people, you need to have a direct line of communication to God. And God is going to speak into you. And so we see Moses modeling this to Joshua to build him up in his leadership. But we also can take a couple things from this, and the fact that Joshua was found trustworthy. He was entrusted with the things of God, which is important. As a leader, being entrusted with the things of God is a huge responsibility. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason why I believe Joshua was entrusted with the things of God is that Joshua, throughout all of his life, we see Joshua understood the mission and the purpose that God was, why he was doing things. And so we see this. So these couple of events, Josh, it's a bonus question. These couple of events that we see, how do you think they helped or Joshua become a leader, and how do you think they helped his self-esteem? How do you think they made him feel?
How they made him feel? Ooh, I was going to say, I was leaning towards when you feeling like saying they gave him confidence because he got to experience God moving and working because of Moses' faith or obedience. And so he kind of got that whole, when we're obedient to God and we're walking closer to God, that our cup overflows and spills out on the people around us. So I feel like, that's one way that it kind of would make him feel, is that confidence of experiencing God's faith kind of secondhand, so it builds him up to lead out in his own faith when it comes time to lead. Did that kind of answer kind of where you were going? Okay.
Yeah, but I think all these things were building blocks for Joshua. I think if you think about, like, if you're a leader underneath somebody and that person invites you to the most important things they do.
It should make it feel special.
It not only makes you feel special, but it also helps you understand the role that you're going to have better, but it lifts you in the fact that you get to do things you never would have probably been able to do or thought you would do. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, this isn't as scary, odd, or hard as I thought it was going to be once I have to do it. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes perfect sense.
All right, but every once in a while Joshua got it wrong too. Okay, Joshua is primarily a great example in the Bible, but every once in a while he's not as focused as he needs to be. So in Numbers 11, 26 through 30, it says, this is right after Moses had just selected 70 leaders from the tribes, and they were going to actually go out and tell the people. It was when they were complaining about there's no meat, and God's about to provide the quail. So they select these 70, and 2 of them stay back. And they stay back for a reason, and Joshua bangs into them, and this is the story we had. It says, now 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad and the other named Medad. And the Spirit of God, rested on them. They were among those registered, but they had not gone out to the tent. And so they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and told Moses, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. And Joshua, the son of Nun, the assistant of Moses from his youth, said, my Lord, stop them. But Moses said to them, are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would put his Spirit on them. And Moses and the elders returned to the camp. So Joshua sees somebody stealing a little bit of Moses' thunder, or a little bit of Moses' authority or whatever. And so Joshua jumps out and wants to stop them. And Moses quickly puts them back in his place and says, no, we don't stop people from doing what God has called them to do. We don't stop people from doing when God's put his hand on them. I don't worry about other people doing the things that I can do. And so he gets this example, Joshua does, that don't feel threatened in your leadership. God's put a purpose on your life. Do that purpose. Let the other people around them do the purpose that God has put there as well for them. And so Joshua learned that he was to serve God and God's purposes, not Moses as well. He was, in this case, Joshua was kind of looking at Moses saying, I'm going to protect Moses. And God saying, well, if you're going to protect me, you're not protecting God. You protect God first. And so we have this idea of we serve God first, humans second. Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. All right. So then we get to Numbers 13. We're getting a little bit more familiar part of Joshua's story. And this is where in 13 they decide they're going to spy out the land. So they choose 12 spies. Joshua is among those 12 spies. and he goes over and surveys the land with the other 12 spies. And when they return, we kind of know what's going to happen, but I'm going to read Numbers 14, 1 through 10 for you. It says, "Then all the congregation raised a loud voice, or a loud cry, because they had just heard that the promised land that they were promised is hard and it's not going to be easy to get to. And Caleb, Joshua's friend and kind of compatriot, had stood up and said, no, we can take this land. We can do this. And they're like, no, it's too great. It's too hard. There's giants in the land and all this kind of stuff. And so the people now are reacting to that. It says, and they raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night. And all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt, where they were enslaved? And then they said to one another, let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the whole assembly of the congregation of the people of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes and said to all the congregation of the people of Israel, the land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into that land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Then all the congregation said to stone them with stones. But the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of the meeting to all the people of Israel. So here you have Joshua and Caleb standing alone against not just the other 10 spies, but they're standing alone against the whole entire assembly of the people of Israel. So much so that the people grabbed up stones and were thinking about stoning them. But they sought God and what God would do and what God could do and what God wanted to do before comfort. They weren't worried about safety. They weren't worried about, well, we've got a decent life here, or we had a really pretty bad life in Egypt, but it would be better than going to this land. They saw it as God wants this for us. God has promised us this. God is going to give this to us. Let's go take it. And they went against everybody else. Their faith was demonstrated in this. And so, a little aside here. In this story, Caleb speaks up first. We see that in chapter 13, which we didn't read. And then Joshua speaks. And it kind of points to a theme in Joshua's life that we need to look at, is the fact that Joshua was a reluctant leader, I think. I don't think Joshua loved the limelight. I don't think Joshua always wanted to be the one to lead and speak up. And so Caleb, who was very, very forward and very, very outspoken, spoke first. But then Joshua realizes that what Caleb said needed to be said in earnest, so he joins in. But we're going to see this throughout, and we're going to see a whole bunch of passages, a whole lot that says things about be strong and courageous, and people just telling Joshua over and over and over again, be strong and courageous, be strong and courageous. And so Joshua, I think, liked being an assistant. I don't think he wanted to be the man, but he's going to end up being the man, and we see how he turns into that. So, all right, so we go to Numbers 27, continuing his backstory, and this is where Moses, God through Moses, formally selects Joshua to be his second. And so it says, Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, let the Lord, the God of the spirit of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation, who shall go out before them and come in before them, who shall lead them out and bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord may not be as sheep that have no shepherd. So the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom the Spirit of God, and lay your hands on him. Make him stand before Eleazar the priest and all the congregation, and you shall commission him in their sight. You shall invest in him with some of your authority, that all the congregation of the people of Israel may obey. And he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire for him by the judgment of Urim before the Lord. At his word they shall go out, and at his word they shall come in, both he and all the people of Israel with them, the whole congregation. And Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua, and he made him stand before Eleazar the priest and the whole congregation, and he laid hands on him and commissioned him as the Lord directed through Moses. We're going to see this recapped again in Deuteronomy 31, 14, and 23, and then Deuteronomy 31, 44 through 47. So they repeat this several times. But God has chosen Joshua to be Moses' successor. I think it's important to know that God chose Joshua. Moses liked Joshua. Moses poured his life into Joshua. But it said at the beginning, choose for us a man. Moses didn't select him. He said, choose for us a man. And it said, God said, take Joshua, the son of Nun, and make him your successor. And so God has chosen him to lead his people into promised land. He makes it public. Through Moses, he empowers him. He gives him Moses authority for him to learn under and to start doing so that people can see that. But it's God, not Moses, is the one who chooses Joshua. And like I said, I'm sure it made Moses happy. Anybody who's ever fit into somebody's life to see one of their disciples or one of the people that they're rooting for and advocating for all the time get elevated is a positive thing. So we see Joshua have God's hand on him. We see Joshua have Moses' approval, and then we see him presented in front of the people and the people's approval. So Deuteronomy 3, 21 through 22 and 28. This is kind of our last part of his backstory. It says, and I commanded Joshua that at that time, your eyes have seen all that the Lord your God has done to these two kings. This was right before they started to go over the Jordan, right before Moses passed away and Joshua took over leadership. There was these two kings, Sihon and Og, who opposed the Israelites. And God said, now I'm going to show these people who my people are. And so you will defeat Sihon and Og. And so they do. And so this is what he's saying to him after. He said, and I commanded Joshua at that time, your eyes have seen all that the Lord your God has done to these two kings. So will the Lord do to all the kingdoms into which you are crossing. You shall not fear them, for it is the Lord your God who fights for you. But charge Joshua and encourage and strengthen him, for he shall go over at the head of his people, and he shall put them in possession of the land that you shall see. And so God's encouraging Moses to encourage Joshua, to help Joshua see his purpose, to see what God's about to do with him. So they're encouraging Joshua right before he takes over, reminding him of his purpose, but he also is reminding him, God says, I'm going to be with them. God's saying, my presence isn't going to leave when Moses passes away. My presence is going to be with Joshua, and it's going to continue to be with my people. And so he reminded him also of God's covenant. God promised this land to them. God told them, I'm going to give you this land. What God says is true. And so Joshua begins his whole entire ministry, his whole entire leadership with the promise of God's presence, God's power, and God's promise. And we've seen that over and over again through the patriarchs, and now Joshua is taking that on. But Joshua is not in the line of the patriarchs in the same way Moses really wasn't in the line, but he now has been given the oversight, the leadership of that covenant and of that promise. So I love the fact, we're going to take a breath here real quick, okay? So we're going to get into Joshua's big story, but I want to take a little breath right there. But I love the fact that Moses was so okay with sharing. This is this thing about Joshua, but you got to think about what this meant to Joshua. Moses was so okay with sharing his authority. He was so okay with sharing his purpose. He was so okay with sharing his task that he wanted to see Joshua succeed. He wanted to see Joshua built up. And I think if we did more of that, if we looked more to the fact that we want to see the people that God has put in our lives succeed, God could work a whole lot better in our lives. So we're going to start in Joshua. And I'm going to let Joshua read a little bit. So Josh, will you read, let's go ahead and read let's read 1 through 7. And then I'm going to kind of highlight some of that. So Joshua 1 through 7, yeah.
Okay. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea, towards the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to the fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go.
Okay. Beautiful passage. Love this passage. It really speaks to God putting his hand on Joshua and his care for his people and for his leaders, and to see that God cares about how leaders lead, how they live their lives, and then he supports with presence and with power what they do. And so it says, after Moses had died, the Lord said to Joshua the son of Nun. Up to this point, we have not seen God speak directly to Joshua. He might have, we don't know, but we haven't seen it. But now he's no longer speaking into Joshua through Moses. He's speaking directly. So Joshua has now taken on the mantle of that person that God is speaking to lead and direct his people. So there's going to be a direct communication between Joshua and God from this point forward. Then it says that Moses' servant is dead. Now therefore arise and go to the Jordan, and you and all the people, and into the land that I'm giving you, are giving to them, to the people of Israel. So God's giving his command again to Joshua. He's saying, okay, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to speak to you. I'm going to speak into you. But what you're going to do is you're going to go take the promised land. So he gives him this command. He's given to him. He has an assignment. Joshua doesn't have to guess where he's going. He doesn't have to guess what his job is. His job is go and take the promised land. And then when you think about that, you know, if I'm telling you, hey Josh, I want you to go in and you are Josh, but hey Josh, I want you to go in. I want you to take this promised land. You've seen it. It's beautiful, but there are fortified cities. There are armies. There are giants in your mind there. So go and take that. What at that point? What do you think your feelings are a little bit?
Oh man, I'm like torn on where I think Joshua would go, because like there's a part of me that thinks that like he's like, okay, no problem. I've experienced you fighting for us throughout all this time when they were in the wilderness, and at the same time, you know, what leader isn't going to go, oh man, it's kind of all on me, and it's going to be hard, and I got to convince these people who weren't sold before that we can do it this time. And so, you know, you could see him having like this confidence moments, and then you could see like that probably your flesh creep in and want to go, oh man, maybe we should shrink back from it some.
I think you nailed it for all leaders. Every leader has got this. I've done this before. I've seen God at work before in this. I know this can happen, but yet, and we start to think of the little things that could go wrong. We think of all the things we got to do. It starts to overwhelm us a little bit, and God knew that. God knows that in our lives. And so I think we can take some of the words that God is sharing to Joshua here is encouragement. Not that he's giving those words to us, but we can take those and we can say the character of God is in that. And God wants us to be strong and courageous. God wants us to know that he's encouraging us. And so we see that where he says that every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised Moses. So he turns around and says, here's your task. Don't worry about it. I've given this to you. Every place that your foot touches, I'm going to give you. I told Moses I was going to do that. I told Joseph I was going to do that. I told Jacob I was going to do that. I told Isaac I was going to do that. I told Abraham I was going to do that. I'm going to do this. And so he starts that encouragement. And so, and it starts off with God's promise, but within that promise, there is no doubt or exclusion that Joshua should lead the people to do. So even though it's not a super specific plan, it really is a specific plan. So he knows exactly what he's supposed to do. He is supposed to lead the people into the promised land and conquer and take the promised land. Right. And so there is no doubt about what his job is. So then in chapter 4, he goes on in verse 4 and 5. He goes on to start talking about the territory. Then he says, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. This is such a beautiful thing that God says to Joshua that we quote it all the time. We put it on pillows. We put it on T-shirts and stuff like that I will not leave you nor forsake you. And so this is a promise that God makes to Joshua. He's made it to the people of Israel a couple times, but he's making this directly to Joshua. And it's a promise that we can take to heart, that God's not going to leave us nor forsake us. Not that he did this promise to us, like I said just a minute ago, but because God's character is in this promise. The person of God made this promise, and we know that God, those people that he loves, those people that he empowers, those people that he gives his commands to, that are obedient to him, he's not going to forsake them. He's not going to leave them. He's going to be there with them forever and for always. And so he's just reminding us of that. And then in verse 6 he says, be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. And so he says, be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. That idea but I think one of the greatest things about this is that he's not telling them to be strong and courageous like, I need you to gird yourself up. I need you to strap on your sword, put on your big boy pants and be ready. He's saying be strong and courageous because I have given you strength. I have given you courage. You have nothing to worry about because his strength and his courage is in God, not in anything that Joshua can do. And I think that's a really important thing for us to remember, that when we want to be strengthened through God's word, we want to have courage and lose fear in God's word. It's God who takes that away, not us who gives it. And we see that. And so then not only does he tell them to be strong and courageous, he says only be very strong and courageous. And so at the beginning of this, God has outlaid the covenant that we've talked about over and over again. That covenant is, Abraham, I'm going to give you multiple descendants. You're going to be a great nation. You're going to have your own land, and you're going to be a blessing to all the nations. So God has kind of reworked that covenant in Joshua, saying, hey, you're fixing to really, really move this covenant along by taking the land. But don't forget there's another side to the covenant. Don't forget that you have responsibilities. And so he outlines those responsibilities. He says, just remember, be careful to do all that the law of Moses, my servant, commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have success. So where does Joshua's strength and courage come from? Knowing God's word. Where does it come from? Being obedient to God's word. Hearing God's word. Trusting God in his success. So, Josh, a couple questions, okay?
Okay.
God said Joshua would prosper by meditating on the word of God. How does this apply to our lives today?
I mean, my brain's immediately going to Jesus' words in Matthew, where he says, seek first the kingdom of God. That this is kind of a, hey, you heard it, kind of way back at the beginning, and it's not changed. So ask your question to me again real quick.
So how do we apply that whole idea of, if we want to be prosperous in God, not necessarily prosperous in life, but prosperous in God, but how does meditating on God's word, knowing God's word, how do we apply that today?
So, my thought is on that, or what I've experienced is, when we think of meditation as a believer, it's not like this, sit somewhere and try and empty all your thoughts. It's actually the idea of Christian meditation, or meditation on God's word, would be the filling of ourselves with God's word. And so my thought is, like, how do you deal with that is, as you have this personal time of studying God's word, I mean, like this passage talked about, reading and knowing God's word, it's when God takes his word and there's something that just kind of sticks out to you and you just kind of feel it press on your heart a little bit and you just can't let go of it, that God's saying, hey, I want you to keep this in mind. I want you to think about this and to just keep going back to that, because odds are he's wanting to use that to whatever situation or whatever's upcoming or is currently going on in your life, so that you will know, okay, that here it's reared its head. This is how God wants me to respond to this. And so that's kind of what my brain would go to and think about when you're saying, how does God, how do we apply that meditating day and night into being a success in God? Because the success in God would be responding and living in obedience to what he wants us to do. So how do we do that? Exactly. When we know his word, it's so that when we face the opportunity to live in obedience, we know what it is because it's right there, because it's up here. It's not having to go and search for it.
Yeah, when God says, I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, we have to know those plans. Yeah. And those plans are in his word. And those plans they're not hidden. They're very clear, but we have to know them. We have to meditate on them. We have to study them so that we know where God is directing us. So, all right, follow-up question. Why is it necessary for a leader to constantly be reminded of the truths found in God's word? Is it any less important for those who are not leaders? So why is it necessary for a leader to constantly be reminded of the truths found in God's word? And is it any less important for those who are not leaders?
To answer the second first, to just quickly get that one out of the way, I want to say no, but at the same time, I kind of want to say yes. And the reason is, if the purpose of spiritual leadership, if you don't know what we mean when we say spiritual leadership, go back to last week's on Moses. Steve did a great job of teaching basically the life of Moses, summarized them through his leadership style. And the idea of spiritual leadership, in a quick definition for you, it's moving someone closer to God. So if spiritual leadership is about moving someone closer to God or being more like Jesus, then we have to know His Word. So that's where I want to say yes, but you know, and the same as no, we all need to know God's Word, because we all need to do it, because we all should be having someone we're spiritual leading, and we talked about that last week, in case you want to go back to that, if we're all spiritual leaders of at least someone, and that's ourselves. But I want to say, like, that to your first question, you know, we have to know God's Word in order to know where we're trying to lead them to. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gosh, my mind's...
Yeah, no. I mean, and also, leadership is hard. Leadership is a burden in some ways, because you're responsible not just for yourself, you're responsible for somebody else. You're responsible for, in spiritual leadership, you're responsible for guiding them to God. So if I'm guiding you to God, Josh, if I'm leading you spiritually, I better understand what I'm doing. I better be reminded of the things of God, so that I can remind you of the things of God. If I just start telling you things and God's not in them, I'm really not spiritually leading you. I'm just leading you, which is not the same thing. And so it also is a comfort and a peace and an encouragement to look at God's Word and to say, yes, this is hard. Yes, that didn't go the way I wanted it to yesterday. I failed here. This is a struggle. But God's like, I'm with you, and I'm going to work through that with you. And so knowing God's Word, we can claim that Word and those promises and His truth and apply that to our lives to keep moving forward. And so I think that's kind of where it fits into the whole leadership. You
know, thinking about what you're saying, like, one of the things when I've been put in a leadership position before, it's like, what am I supposed to do, or what am I supposed to say? And like the thing of, you know, in discipleship is a form of spiritual leadership. When you're pouring into someone, you go, well, I don't know what to say, and in case you hold back. Well, actually, no. Knowing God's Word, it gives you something to say. Yeah. Like, what do you say? Oh, I just teach you what God has taught me and what I know.
Yep. And it's a whole lot better than the answers we might come up with.
That's true.
So yeah. All right, so if you go on to verse 9, it says, God continues on, he says, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And so this is this kind of final encouragement of God to Joshua. And basically, he's alluded to his presence. He's alluded to him being with them. But here he says, the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So no matter where Joshua goes, God's saying, I'm going to be with you. So Josh, how are God's presence and how is God's promises, how is God's presence and how are God's promises connected?
Well, you know, to think of them as connected, because, I mean, God's promises really can't be filled without God being present to do them, is kind of where I just want to naturally go with that real quick. But, you know, God being, like, we live, obviously, kind of the opposite. God came and went from people in the Old Testament in God's hand. As a believer, you know, post Jesus Christ, you know, the Holy Spirit is with us all the time. So, you know, I guess it's maybe natural for me to say God's presence and His promises are connected. But, you know, when we think of, I think the right way of what you're getting at is to think of it a different way. Is that when we're constantly immersing ourselves in God's presence, when we're seeking Him, when we're trying to study His Word, when we're spending time talking with Him through prayer, when we're meditating on His Word, we're filling ourselves aware of His presence. Yeah. And so when we're doing that, our faith is going to be strong, our actions are going to be in obedience, and so therefore we'll experience the joy and the blessing of God's promises more. So when you're thinking about them being connected, you know, when we're seeking God's presence is the way to finding and experiencing the benefit of God's promises coming true.
Yeah. But I mean, it's kind of like if I promise Josh, hey, we're going to work on this together next week, and I don't show up. That promise is not going to happen, probably. Right. So it's kind of the same thing where God's presence is the promise is actually a benefit or a secondary part of His presence. His presence is amongst the Israelite people, just like the Holy Spirit's presence is amongst believers. And so out of that comes all the promise that everything that we do and everything that God has said He would do is going to come forward. So there's a connection that you really can't break it apart. Right. It's kind of like who came first, the egg or chicken or the egg, but they're one and the same. Is that the promise and God's presence must be together and connected in that way. So how does God's presence and promise change our perspective on difficult situations?
You know, it has to. I mean, when we think of God's presence and promise has to, as we as believers, change the way we look at a difficult situation. Because when we look at a situation absent of God, it's all reliant based on our ability to navigate it. Yep. When we look on a difficult situation in light of the presence of God, there is no situation or obstacle or part of it that is too hard, too difficult, too big, too hard to understand, whatever, whatever the obstacle might be. There is none of that that is too big in whatever way. So in a lot of ways, when we look at, because of God's presence and God's promises, we look at a difficult situation and it should no longer be difficult. Yep. If we were really, I think, mature and strong in our faith, we wouldn't say there's such thing as a difficult situation.
Yes, no.
Because
I was just about to say that. If we say that the Holy Spirit is present with us all the time, why do we worry about things? Why do we stress about things? Why do we look at things and go, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? When in all reality, God's Spirit lives within us and His presence is with us, and it really doesn't matter what happens around us because God is controlling, guiding us, and leading us. The problem is we so often push His presence into the back of the closet or whatever, and it's our presence that matters, and our personalities, and our strengths, and all that kind of stuff that we try to live our lives on, and that's when things become difficult because we are incapable of handling some of the things that we have to handle.
I mean, I just think of what kind of testimony would it be to someone who doesn't know Christ if they walk up to you and be like, man, don't you think this is a difficult situation? And you go, no, I haven't faced a difficult situation in 20 years. Like, it would, shock them so bad, they would just have no clue what you were talking about, and they'd be like, okay, there's kind of a window to then share with.
Most definitely. So verse 10 says, and Joshua commanded the officers of the people, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, and prepare your provisions, for within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan to go and take possession of the land, and the Lord your God has given you to possess. So we see again where Joshua has immediate obedience, and he trusts in God. God's told him this. He says, okay, you told me that, let's go. They start packing everything up, and he commands the people. This is very similar to when Moses said to Joshua, hey, go grab some men and fight the Amalekites. He said, Joshua went. We see this constant, just immediate obedience out of Joshua. So then in verse 12 through 15, there's kind of a recap of if you remember, 2.5 tribes took their land on the other side of the Jordan. It was Reuben, it was Gad, and it was the half tribe of Manasseh. And God had told them, if you do this, you still have to go help your brothers, the rest of your people, take the promised land before you get rest. Well, Joshua here reminds them, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he reminds them, like, listen, you need to send me your best warriors. You need to go with us. You need to go and help us conquer this land. Then you will have rest. Then you will fulfill your duty to God. So Joshua, in this case, had remembered. And now he's not only remembered, he's reminding them, the Transjordan tribes, of their agreement with God and Moses. So we see this first kind of act of leadership out of Joshua is, I was taught this, I need to teach this. And so you see him transferring that. So there was an attention to the words of God, there was attention to the instructions of Moses, there was an attention to the details, and now Joshua is doing all that he was taught and instructed, just as God told him to do as part of that covenant. So then verse 16, the reaction of those 2.5 tribes and the rest of the Israelites was, and they answered Joshua, all that you have commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, that's questionable, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your commandment and disobeys your words, whatever you command him shall be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. So Moses, a little bit of Moses here, Moses not only taught Joshua how to be obedient and faithful, but he has started instructing this next generation how to be obedient and faithful to what God has called them to do. And we see that, and it prepared Joshua, it prepared a way in Joshua's leadership. And so we see the people, and they know that God's hand is now on Joshua. They see it, they know it. Moses has demonstrated, God has demonstrated, Joshua's demonstrated by the way he's taken on that leadership. And so they encourage him just as Moses and God has. So the people are now encouraging him. How do you think this affected Joshua's leadership? This is his first leadership step. God tells him what to do. He tells everybody to prepare, reminds them of their responsibilities, and I'm like, all right, we're with you. We'll do whatever you do. How do you think this made him feel?
I'm sure that excited him, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I think of when I'm serving the Lord and like I lead a couple teams here at church, and when they're like, we're with you, man, it makes me excited to say, yeah, well, let's go charge this down with whatever the task is. And so I don't know, I just think it had to excite him.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it pumped him up, and he was like, okay, maybe God is with me. I mean, yeah. It's just, God's going to lead the people. He's going to lead us. okay, maybe his presence is here, because I've seen these people be really stubborn and really hard-headed, and all of a sudden they're all in. And so that's a good thing. And so his beginning of his ministry starts off with this encouraging thing. And so over in chapter 3 and chapter 4, it's just so cool to me how God takes the life of Joshua and puts little things in it to help people realize he's their leader. Moses parted the Red Sea. Okay, big deal. So Joshua is going to have a moment where God parts the Jordan River. The Jordan River is not the Red Sea, not even close. But there are places in the Jordan River where they could have been crossing. It would have been very difficult for a large group of people to cross. There weren't any bridges. And so God says, I'm going to part the Jordan for you. And take the Ark of the Covenant. When the Ark of the Covenant touches the waters will part. You can walk across. And so you have this whole thing. And this demonstrates God's favor and his leadership on Joshua. So he is using there was probably another way, but he's like, just like I did for Moses, I'm doing for Joshua. My hand is on Joshua. So he's showing him that. But however, Joshua, when Moses held up his staff, I don't know how many people actually knew that it wasn't just Moses holding up his staff. Here, Joshua's doing nothing except for leading the people. The Ark of the Covenant, the presence of God, is what is parting the waters. And so it is a reminder that I'm using Joshua, okay, but God is the one that's going to take the promised land. God is the one that's leading us. And so then in Joshua 4, 24 and 21, Joshua says to the people of Israel, he says, when your children ask, because they build up this whole altar, all the tribes bring a stone and they build this altar to God out on the other side of the Jordan. So he says, when your children ask their fathers in times to come, what do these stones mean? When you shall let your children know, Israel passed over the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you pass over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples on the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever. So Joshua knows that it's God who parted the Jordan. Okay, he understands that, and he knows it's significant, and he knows that it's so significant, and he remembers how the people would forget that God parted the Red Sea. So he's like, let's build this altar to remind us. So he puts a symbol, and this is a symbol not just of what God just did, but it's a symbol of the beginning of God fulfilling his promise of the promised land. So this is going to be something he points the generations to over and over and over again. And he memorialized this not just for this generation, but for the generations to come. And so God's faithfulness in Joshua's going to make sure that God's faithfulness was not forgotten. He does this again. He also reinstates circumcision right after this. We don't have to read about that. It's uncomfortable. But he reinserts circumcision, and they do the Passover. And so he takes these things that are to remind people of God's covenant, and he reinstates those amongst this new generation that's going on, so they can be short of what they know of God's faithfulness and what he's done. So then, all the way over into chapter 5. This is a little itty-bitty story right before they go into the land, and if you remember, they go and they scout out Jericho, because that's the first city they're going to go to. Jericho's a really strong city. God sends in spies. There's the whole Rahab story, which if we were doing Rahab, we would talk about that more, but we're not. But right as that was happening, the spies are there, Joshua goes up to look over Jericho. It says when Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked. And behold, a man was standing before him with his drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said, are you for us or for our adversaries? And he said, no, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped and said to him, what does my Lord say to his servant? And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are staying is holy. And Joshua did so. This is a short little passage that shows both that God's presence and power is with the people. He sent the commander of the army of the Lord. Okay, so God has sent his people to be with them. His presence is with them. But it also shows Joshua's humility and servanthood. And so we see this little thing where Joshua was God has already made him the leader of all of his people, but he sees this emissary of God, God's presence there, and he bows down. He says, what do you want your servant to do? So he realized that he was going to be a vessel of God's success, but he was not going to be the object of God's success. It was going to be God. And I think that's a really important thing for us to remember any time that we have success, is that little bit of humility and that little bit of servanthood. So Joshua 6, 1 through 5. Josh, will you read that for us?
It says, now Jericho was shut up inside and outside because of the people of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand, and its king and mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all the men of war going around the city once, and thus you shall do for 6 days. 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat. And the people shall go up, everyone straight before him. Did you say through?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
So God gives his instructions to Joshua for taking Jericho. What's missing in the minds of man?
Like how to do the battle? Like
yeah. There's no weapons mentioned. There's no strategy as far as plans. Like are we going to siege? Are we going to come from different ways? Are we going to trick them to come out? God just gives them this plan of walk around and blow trumpets and shout. Okay, so God's also he's already told Joshua he's given him this land. So he's got to give him Jericho for him to get to the land. So if this is all ceremonial actions that are described, why do you think God asked them to do them anyhow?
I mean, I think it goes into that, I hate to say it this way, with the ludicrousy of following God sometimes. Yeah. It makes absolutely no sense to us.
Yeah.
But when we do it, something that makes absolutely no sense, there's only one person that can get the glory, and that's God.
That's exactly right. I mean, if we were to walk around the church right now 7 times and shout and blow a trumpet, our walls aren't coming down.
Oh no! Instantly, the renovations would be done.
Yeah. But this was done so that there was nobody else to point to but God. Not just for the people of Israel, but for the people around as well. They were going to see this and go, man, Israel didn't lift a finger, and God won this victory for them. So okay, Joshua 6 and 7, basically they do exactly what God says, and it happens. And so, my question, do you think it was easy for Joshua and the people of Israel to do this? Do you think they heard God's instructions and they're like, we know what we're facing. Yeah, okay, we'll do this. I mean, like, I mean, they did this for 7 days. What do you think they were thinking?
I think they thought it was dumb. I mean, I think they had to.
Yeah.
Like, this makes no sense. That, or, this is what you hope. I would hope if I experience God working over and over again, that I just don't think it's weird or dumb. I just say, okay, and just do whatever God has called me to do. But I think that last day, like I was just talking with someone before we started teaching about God's word and one of the promises He gives. I think there's always that fear of, is God really going to come through?
Yeah.
And I think, on that I think first day's easy, second, third, fifth, sixth. I think that 7th day when they're making those laps and they're like,
shuffling their feet.
I hope this happens, because we're going to look really silly if it doesn't. Yeah. Or I say look seriously. Maybe they were being vulnerable. Like maybe it made them vulnerable to attack.
No, it didn't. Well, first of all, I mean, it showed their obedience, which is great. It also it was just, there was nobody else you could ascribe that victory to but God. And so I think that's what was important. But I think it was probably very hard for them to do it.
Yeah.
Especially since you got to think, for 40 years, this generation has been preparing for entering in the conquest of the Promised Land. I think of conquest, I think of swords, I think of sieges, I think of all that kind of stuff. And so the first big place they get to, we're going to sing and shout and blow horns. Great. Okay. So basically the rest of the story is walls collapse, they take Jericho, God tells them to commit everything to Jericho. There's a little side story that we're not going to get into. They save Rahab, that's another side story we're not going to get into. But at the very end of it, after all that's happened in Jericho, in verse 27 it says, so the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in all of the land. So the conquest had begun, and God was now going before his people of the land, not his people, but the people of the land, and he was putting the fear of God and the fear of Joshua in them. Through one act at Jericho, God made lots and lots and lots of Joshua's job easier, because everywhere they went from this point forward, people feared the Israelites. They were afraid of their God, and so it helped in the conquest. And so God used Joshua in that. So now we're going to jump. Joshua and the people of God, they conquer a large part of the Promised Land. They don't conquer it all, and it actually says that God told them to rest for a while, that you will continue to conquer the land. Josh is going to talk when we get into Judges about the fact that they failed in that, but he gives them a little bit of rest. Joshua's older, about ready to give up his leadership, and he's about to die, but so Joshua is coming to the end of his time with the Israelite people. They've done a lot of what God's asked them to. They've given every tribe their inheritance. Every person within that tribe has had their inheritance. They've done all the things they were supposed to do. And so in 23 through 24, chapter 23 through 24:13, basically Joshua is encouraging the people here at the end of his leadership. He's saying, he's commanding them to obey God's word. He's renewing the covenant with them, and he's telling them to not have any other gods before God. And so basically he's saying, remain faithful to God. God, you've seen what God's given you. You know you have a little bit more to do. Remain faithful, and God's going to give that to you. And so there's that whole part of that. But in verse 14 of chapter 24, it says, now therefore fear the Lord and serve him. And this is Joshua speaking to his people. He says, now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve. Whether the gods of your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Great. Very different from Joshua early on, who didn't want to speak up to somebody who put a stake in the ground and says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So Joshua is acting and leading by example. He's going to his people and he's saying, you've got choices. I'm not telling you what to choose, but as for me and my house, we are going to serve the Lord. And so whether they followed or not, didn't matter to Joshua, did it? Right. He didn't care if they followed. I mean, he wanted them to follow, but what he's saying is, I'm going to follow whether you do or not. I'm not looking to somebody else and looking to see what you're doing to determine what I'm going to do with God. And so he and his house would serve God. But Joshua was a good leader, so they responded this way. It says, then the people answered and said, far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our fathers up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did those great signs in our sight, and preserved us all in the way that we went, and among all the people from whom we have passed. And the Lord drove out before us all the peoples, the Amorites who lived in the land. Therefore we will serve the Lord, for he is our God. So this is a positive, happy, wonderful thing. The people are responding, saying, Joshua said, as for me and my house, I'm going to serve the Lord. As for us and our houses, we're going to serve the Lord. This doesn't last very long. Josh's going to talk about that next week in Judges. But for right now, he's led them to this idea of we are going to seek God's faithfulness. So the people respond. They receive his example. So, question, Josh. We can't make another person worship God. Okay? I can't do it. I can't make you say, Josh, you got to worship God. But certain actions that we can take within our households or within our interactions with other people increase the likelihood of them either worshiping God or ignoring God. So how can we model this in our homes and our relationships to help people worship God?
So for me, when I think about this, I think it's just like going back to like one of those youth terms here, like the whole live out loud thing. Mm-hmm. Like your faith, the way that you worship God, is that you live it, you know, not for the world to see, but that when people do look at your life, they see you doing the things of God, and then in return, they see God working and moving in your life. And so...
And you recognizing his working and moving in your life.
Right. Yeah. And I think, you know, a key aspect of that is giving him credit when he does something. So it's like you have this moment of success in your life, and you know, we might use that word success, but we'll say also really what it is, we see this moment of God blessing in your life, and you saying, okay, you know, you've been promoted at work or something like that, and you say, where you give credit, yeah, you know, I worked really hard, I deserved it. Or we say, you know what, I've just always tried to use the talents God's given me to the best that I can, and I just want to give him the glory. You know, just that's a small example, you know, mm-hmm. And maybe we seem like, oh, that's like very... you know, cookie cutter or cheesy, but no, seriously, like in everything that we do, when something goes good, do we praise God? When something goes bad, do we not lose hope? And all those kind of things play into that when we are living those out and people look at our lives, they can see that God is real, that God is alive, that God is moving, and that we respond to him. So that when people do look in, you know, oh, the things that he says about God to me or the things I read about God are true because I see them in his life.
Yeah, like when Joshua says, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Joshua served the Lord all his life. And so there was no doubt that Joshua was serving God. And so he did it by example as much as by word. So the very end of Joshua's, the book of Joshua, chapter 24, it says, "But Joshua said to the people, 'You are not able to serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you. But he will consume you after having done you good.' And the people said to Joshua, 'No, but we will serve the Lord.' Then Joshua said to the people, 'You are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen the Lord to serve him.' And they said, 'We are witnesses.' And he said, 'Then put away the foreign gods that are among you. Incline your heart to the Lord, the God of Israel.' And the people said to Joshua, 'The Lord our God we will serve, and his voice we will obey.' So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day, and put in place statutes and rules for them at Shechem. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God. And he took a large stone, and he set it up under the terebinth that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And Joshua said to all the people, 'Behold, this stone shall be a witness against us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord that he spoke to us. Therefore it will be a witness against you, lest you deal falsely with your God.' So Joshua sent his people away, every man to his inheritance." So in this passage, we see the covenant being fulfilled. It's a great amount of people. Okay, there's this multitude of people, a great nation. They are serving God. He has asked them, they've repeated that call, they're going to serve God. And in that last sentence, he says, every man went to his inheritance. They had been given the promised land. So God's covenant is fulfilled in all this. And so we see through the life of Joshua that he led to the end, to the purpose that he was given. So I want to ask, Josh, we can answer these real quickly, but just two questions to kind of get us into application of all Joshua. So how does God's past provision serve as motivation to present and future faithfulness? And we talked about this a lot in the Patriarchs. This is going to be kind of a recap, but it's something we need to see in Joshua.
I think, God's past provision is remembering and seeing him move, so it'll spur us on to present, obedience to those things, and then be there with us to be obedient into the future ones as well.
Yeah, and I also think it also should spur us on to not stopping to serve God.
Right.
When we look at the past God's provision, and we see the blessing that he's given us for our obedience or for us doing what he's called us to do, we should want more and more of that. And so there's not this resting point that okay, I've got enough of God's blessing. Right. I don't want any more. I don't need any more. That should never be the case. It should be God's promise he's going to bless me. God's promise he's going to be with me. God's promise me that he's going to do these things.
I want all that God has.
I want all that God, yes. And then the next question, Josh, you don't have to answer this one, but this one's kind of for everybody, just to kind of think about this week and to apply through this is, where do you feel that God is calling you to do something you're unsure of? Okay, so think about something that you're unsure. This could be a worry, this could be a stress, this could be some decision you have to make. It could be anything that you're just kind of, you're unsure, okay? And so how do these passages encourage you towards obedience, even in the face of that fear and that doubt that you might have? So whatever you're facing this week, think about the life of Joshua. Think about your life and how God's been present. His presence has been there, his power has been there, his promise has been there. And how does that help you work through that and use that to work through that? So I hope you've enjoyed this time with Joshua. Joshua is a great book of encouragement. It's a great life of encouragement. It's a great life to look at for leadership, for faith, obedience, all those things. And so, but the sad part is as good as the ending of Joshua kind of is, and the people are all, yay God, we're going to follow God. It takes one generation, we're going to see, to change all that. And so Josh is going to start with that next week. We're going to enter into the Judges with Deborah, I believe. And so Josh is going to teach us there. So I'm going to ask Josh if you'll close us in prayer, and then we'll close up.
Lord, thank you again for allowing us to study your word together. Lord, I pray that these words that we've read will just spur us on into remembering to be faithful and obedient, because you have incredible blessings for us, and Lord, that we would desire to have all the blessings you have for us. Lord, thank you for speaking to us today. Help us as we go out from here to live and be obedient to you. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
We'll see you all next week. Have a great week.